Welcome back, dear friend. Centuries of quiet nights are breathing with us now. Listen to the whisper of the past, and let it lull you into the kind of sleep that knows no worry. Chapter 1. Beneath the desert stars, a gentle beginning. You find yourself standing at the edge of an ancient settlement where the last of the day's warmth still radiates from weathered stone walls that have known countless sunsets before this one. The air moves slowly here, carrying with it the faint scent of dry herbs and the lingering whisper of incense that drifted from windows now closed against the cooling night. Above you, the vast desert sky unfolds like a dark tapestry woven with silver threads, each star a small beacon in the endless expanse that stretches beyond the horizon where sand meets eternity. Your feet rest upon ground that has been smoothed by generations of footsteps, the earth packed firm beneath sandaled feet that have walked these same paths through seasons beyond counting. The stones beneath you are cool now, having released their stored heat to the night air, and you can feel their ancient presence through the thin soles of your shoes, each step a quiet communion with the countless others who have passed this way before. The settlement spreads before you like a collection of gentle dreams made manifest in clay and stone, its low buildings rising from the desert floor as naturally as rock formations, their rounded corners softened by time and the patient work of wind and weather. Windows glow with the warm amber light of oil lamps, casting soft rectangles of illumination that spill onto the narrow pathways that wind between the structures like streams of golden water flowing through a landscape of shadows. You begin to walk, your pace unhurried and contemplative, along a path that curves gently away from the settlement's edge toward its quiet heart. The sound of your footsteps creates a soft rhythm against the packed earth, a gentle percussion that seems to match the slow beating of your heart as it settles into the peaceful cadence of this place. Each step carries you deeper into the embrace of this ancient refuge, where time moves differently than in the rushing world beyond the desert's edge. The buildings you pass are modest in their construction, yet elegant in their simplicity, their walls rising from the earth in gentle curves that speak of hands that understood both strength and beauty. Small gardens nestle against some of the structures, where desert plants grow in careful arrangements that seem to blur the line between the cultivated and the wild. Palm fronds rustle softly in the night breeze, their sound like gentle whispers shared between old friends, while the leaves of smaller plants catch and reflect the starlight in tiny flashes of silver. As you continue along the winding path, you notice how the darkness here is not empty but full of subtle gradations of shadow and light, each corner and alcove holding its own particular quality of quietude. The walls around you are painted in colors that daylight would reveal as warm ochres and deep blues, but in the gentle illumination of night, they appear as soft grays and deeper grays, a palette of tranquility that soothes the eye and calms the mind. You pause for a moment beside a small fountain that marks the intersection of several pathways, its water catching the starlight and fragmenting it into countless tiny mirrors that dance and shimmer with each gentle movement of the surface. The sound of the water is barely audible, a soft murmuring that adds its voice to the night's quiet symphony. The fountain's basin is carved from a single piece of stone, its surface worn smooth by years of use, and you can imagine the countless hands that have cupped its cool water, the faces that have been reflected in its surface under skies much like this one. The air around you carries subtle scents that speak of a life lived in harmony with the desert's rhythms. The dry sweetness of date palms, the green freshness of herbs grown in small gardens, the faint smokiness of cooking fires that have long since died to glowing embers. These fragrances blend and mingle in the still air, creating an olfactory tapestry that tells the story of this place as clearly as any written history might. You resume your gentle walk, following a path that leads you past a series of workshops where artisans practice their ancient crafts during the cooler hours of darkness. Through partially open doorways, you catch glimpses of dimly lit interiors where shadows move slowly across walls, lined with tools and materials that speak of skills passed down through generations. The soft sound of work continues even at this late hour, the gentle tapping of a hammer against metal, the whisper of a brush against clay, the quiet scraping of wood being shaped by patient hands. The rhythm of your steps begins to synchronize with these distant sounds of purposeful activity, creating a meditative cadence that seems to slow time itself. Each footfall becomes part of a larger pattern, a gentle percussion that connects you to the life of this place, to the endless cycle of work and rest that has sustained this community through the long passage of years. As you walk deeper into the settlement, you notice how the paths seem to follow natural contours in the land, rising and falling gently with the underlying topography in a way that makes each turn reveal new vistas of quiet beauty. The architecture here speaks of builders who understood that true strength comes not from fighting against the landscape, but from working with it, creating structures that seem to grow from the earth itself rather than being imposed upon it. The stars above continue their ancient dance across the vault of the sky, their light falling softly on the settlement below like a blessing whispered by the cosmos itself. You find yourself looking up often as you walk, drawn by the sheer vastness of the display overhead, where the Milky Way stretches across the darkness like a river of light flowing through the heavens. In this clear desert air, far from the glow of larger cities, the stars shine with an intensity that seems almost tangible, as if you could reach up and pluck their light from the darkness. Your path leads you past a small grove of trees that have been carefully tended to provide shade and beauty in this arid landscape. Their leaves rustle softly in the night breeze, creating a sound like gentle rain, while their branches reach upward toward the star-filled sky in gestures that seem to mirror your own upward gaze. Beneath the trees, stone benches offer places for quiet contemplation, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hours of use. The settlement around you seems to breathe with a rhythm all its own, expanding and contracting gently with the night air. Alive but peaceful, purposeful but unhurried. Windows continue to glow with warm light, and occasionally you catch the soft murmur of voices or the gentle sound of laughter drifting on the evening breeze, reminders that this place is home to people who have learned to live in harmony with both the desert's challenges and its gifts. As you continue your meandering journey through this maze of gentle pathways, you begin to notice how the very stones beneath your feet seem to hold memories of all the footsteps that have passed this way before. How the walls around you have absorbed not just the heat of countless days, but also the quiet conversations, the soft laughter, the gentle sighs of generations who have called this place home. The settlement feels like a repository of accumulated peace, a place where tranquility has been carefully cultivated and preserved like a precious resource. Chapter 2. Stone Walls and Whispered Paths. Your footsteps carry you forward along pathways that seem to have been carved from the very essence of quietude itself, each stone placed with such deliberate care that walking upon them feels like participating in an ancient ritual of peace. The settlement's entrance begins to reveal itself through a series of low stone walls that rise from the earth like gentle waves, their surfaces weathered smooth by countless seasons of desert wind, and the soft caress of time passing without urgency or haste. These walls stand no higher than your waist, their modest height speaking of a people who have never felt the need to hide behind imposing barriers, who have found their security not in towering fortifications, but in the deep understanding that true safety comes from living in harmony with the rhythms of the natural world. The stones themselves seem to glow with a subtle warmth in the starlight, their pale surfaces catching and holding the gentle illumination that falls from the vast canopy above, creating patterns of light and shadow that shift and dance with each breath of the evening breeze. As you move closer to these welcoming barriers, you notice how the walls curve and bend with organic grace, following contours that seem less designed by human hands than discovered by them, as though the builders simply recognized the natural lines that the desert itself had drawn, and chose to honor those ancient boundaries with their careful stonework. The gaps between the walls create narrow passages that invite exploration, pathways that wind and meander with the unhurried confidence of streams that have learned to follow the most peaceful course through the landscape. Your fingers brush against the smooth stone as you pass through one of these gentle openings, and the surface feels warm beneath your touch, still holding the memory of the day's sun even as the cool night air flows around you like a quiet blessing. The texture speaks of countless hands that have touched these same stones, countless footsteps that have worn these pathways smooth, countless moments of peaceful passage that have accumulated here like layers of sediment in a still pond, each one adding to the deep sense of tranquility that permeates this place. The sound of your footsteps changes as you move from the open ground onto the settlement's paved pathways, the soft whisper of sand and earth giving way to the gentle tap of stone against stone, a rhythm that seems to echo the beating of your own heart, steady and calm and perfectly unhurried. This new sound blends with the subtle symphony of night sounds that surrounds you, the distant murmur of wind through the settlement's corridors, the soft rustle of fabric hanging in doorways, the almost inaudible whisper of air moving through carved openings in walls and rooftops. The pathways themselves are narrow, wide enough for two people to walk side by side, but intimate enough to create a sense of closeness, of being embraced by the settlement's gentle architecture. The stones beneath your feet have been fitted together with such precision that no mortar was needed, each piece finding its perfect place in the whole through the patient work of crafts, people who understood that the strongest bonds are those that emerge from natural harmony rather than forced adhesion. As you walk deeper into this maze of peaceful passages, the walls on either side rise slightly higher, creating corridors that feel like gentle embraces, protective without being confining, secure without being closed. Small alcoves carved into these walls hold simple objects, perhaps a ceramic vessel catching starlight in its curves, or a piece of carved wood that speaks of patient hands working in quiet hours, creating beauty for no reason other than the joy of bringing something lovely into the world. The air here carries different scents than the open desert. The mineral smell of stone warmed by sun and cooled by night. The faint fragrance of herbs growing in hidden gardens. The subtle aroma of cook fires that have long since burned down to glowing embers. These scents blend and mingle in ways that create an olfactory landscape as complex and soothing as the visual one that surrounds you, each breath bringing new combinations that speak of a life lived in close harmony with the elements. Occasionally, as you make your way through these winding passages, you catch glimpses through doorways or over low walls of the life that continues within this settlement even at this quiet hour. A window glowing with the warm light of an oil lamp reveals the suggestion of someone moving slowly within, perhaps preparing for sleep or engaged in some gentle evening task. The soft sound of water being poured from one vessel to another drifts from a courtyard you cannot see, accompanied by the quiet murmur of voices so low and peaceful they seem like part of the night's natural soundtrack. Your path curves gently to the right, then to the left, following patterns that seem random but feel perfectly natural, as though you are being led by some invisible current that knows exactly where you need to go. The walls beside you show the marks of their makers, subtle variations in the stonework that speak of human hands working with love and patience, small irregularities that add character and warmth to surfaces that might otherwise feel cold or impersonal. Above you, the star-filled sky continues its eternal watch, the vast dome of night creating a ceiling that makes even the most enclosed passages feel open and connected to the infinite. The contrast between the intimate scale of the settlement's architecture and the limitless expanse above creates a sense of being held safely between earth and sky, grounded yet free, protected yet part of something infinitely larger than yourself. The rhythm of your walking becomes a meditation in itself, each step a small prayer of gratitude for this moment of peace, this opportunity to move through a world where haste has no place and urgency is unknown. The gentle sound of your footsteps mingles with the other quiet sounds of the night to create a symphony of tranquility, a music that speaks not of excitement or drama, but of the profound beauty that can be found in the simple act of existing peacefully within the flow of time. As you continue your unhurried journey through these stone-lined pathways, you begin to sense that you are not merely walking through a settlement, but participating in something larger, becoming part of a living tapestry of peace that has been woven from countless moments just like this one. Countless footsteps, countless breaths, countless heartbeats that have found their way to this rhythm of perfect calm that seems to be the natural heartbeat of this ancient and timeless place. Chapter 3. Central Square of Quietude. The pathway beneath your feet begins to widen gradually, the narrow confines of the residential quarter opening like a flower blooming in the darkness as you approach what feels like the heart of this ancient settlement. Each step carries you closer to a space that seems to breathe differently, where the air moves with a fuller rhythm and the shadows take on deeper, more expansive shapes that speak of openness and gathering, of a place where the community has centered itself for countless generations beneath these same unchanging stars. Your footsteps echo differently now, the sound spreading outward instead of being contained by close walls, and you realize you are entering the central square of this desert sanctuary, a space that has been worn smooth by the passage of time and the gentle traffic of daily life. The transition from the intimate pathways to this broader expanse feels like emerging from a cave into moonlight, though here the moonlight is starlight, and the cave was merely the loving embrace of narrow streets that have guided you safely to this place of quiet congregation. The square stretches before you in dimensions that feel both generous and intimate, large enough to accommodate the entire population of the settlement, yet small enough that every corner remains connected to the center by invisible threads of community and shared purpose. The ground here is paved with the same weathered stone that lines the pathways, but the stones are larger, more carefully fitted together in patterns that create subtle variations in texture beneath your feet, a kind of tactile poetry that tells the story of master craftsmen who understood that even the ground people walk upon can be a work of art. As your eyes adjust to the different quality of space and shadow in the square, you begin to make out the gentle landmarks that anchor this communal heart. Near the center, barely visible in the starlight but unmistakably present in the way it seems to gather the night around itself, stands an ancient well. Its circular stone rim worn smooth by countless hands that have drawn water from its depths over the centuries that this settlement has called the desert home. You move toward the well with the same unhurried pace that has characterized your entire journey through this peaceful place, feeling no urgency to reach it quickly, but rather allowing yourself to appreciate the gradual approach. The way each step brings new details into focus, while maintaining the overall sense of serene spaciousness that defines this central gathering place. The well seems to exist in perfect harmony with the square around it, neither dominating the space nor hiding within it, but rather serving as a natural focal point that gives meaning and purpose to the open area without demanding attention. The stone rim of the well rises from the ground like a natural formation, weathered to such smoothness that your hand, when you finally reach out to touch it, encounters a surface that feels almost alive beneath your fingers, warm from the day's heat still radiating gently upward, even in the coolness of night. The ancient stones have been shaped by weather and touch into something that transcends mere function, becoming a meditation on the relationship between human need and natural resource, between the practical necessity of water and the spiritual necessity of gathering in community around shared sources of life. Leaning slightly over the well's edge, you can sense, rather than see, the depth that extends downward into darkness. And though you cannot hear the sound of water far below, there is something in the quality of the air that rises from those depths that speaks of coolness and moisture, of the underground rivers that make life possible in this desert sanctuary. The well seems to exhale a breath of deeper earth, carrying with it the accumulated coolness of stone and water that have never seen sunlight. A reminder that even in this place of surface tranquility, there are depths and mysteries that sustain everything above. Around the square, at careful intervals that create rhythm without repetition, stand sculptures carved from the same stone that forms the settlement's walls and pathways, figures that emerge from the darkness like gentle guardians of the night's peace. These are not monuments to conquest or power, but rather celebrations of the quiet virtues that have allowed this community to flourish in its desert refuge, sculptures that speak of patience, wisdom, compassion, and the deep understanding that comes from living in harmony with the natural rhythms of a harsh but beautiful land. The nearest sculpture depicts a figure seated in contemplation, hands resting loosely in lap, face turned slightly upward toward the stars, in an expression of serene attention that seems to capture the very essence of peaceful awareness. The carving is worn by centuries of desert wind and rare rain, the details softened until the sculpture seems less like a representation of a specific person and more like an embodiment of the timeless human capacity for quiet reflection, for finding meaning in stillness and wisdom, in patient observation of the world's deeper patterns. Moving slowly around the square's perimeter, you encounter other sculptures, each one a variation on themes of peace and contemplation, of work done with careful attention and life lived with grateful awareness of the gifts that each day brings. There is a figure of a woman holding what might once have been a water vessel, her posture speaking of service offered freely and with joy, her face bearing an expression of gentle strength that suggests the kind of leadership that guides through example rather than command. Another sculpture shows an elderly figure, gender ambiguous in the way that great age sometimes makes distinctions less important, seated with what appears to be an open book or scroll, though the details have been worn away until only the gesture of reading and sharing knowledge remains. A reminder that in this place, learning and teaching have always been valued as sacred activities, ways of honoring the wisdom of the past while preparing gifts for the future. The sculptures seem to participate in the night's tranquility rather than interrupting it, their presence adding to, rather than competing with the natural peace of the square. They serve as anchor points for contemplation, places where the eye can rest while the mind settles into deeper appreciation of the profound quiet that characterizes not just this moment, but the entire way of life that has evolved in this desert sanctuary over the long centuries of its existence. Between the sculptures, the open spaces of the square invite movement and rest in equal measure. Areas where you can imagine the daily life of the community unfolding in patterns of gentle activity, morning gatherings around the well, evening conversations that extend naturally into the cooling night, celebrations that honor the changing seasons, and the simple fact of continued existence in this place where survival itself is a form of victory over the desert's challenges. The starlight, falling into the square, creates a constantly shifting pattern of illumination and shadow as the night sky turns slowly overhead, and you find yourself becoming part of this cosmic dance, your movement through the space creating new relationships between light and darkness, between the fixed points of sculptures and the flowing presence of a human being moving peacefully through a space designed to accommodate and honor such movement. Standing now near the center of the square, you can feel the settlement spreading outward around you in all directions, the pathways and dwellings that you have walked through and others that remain to be explored, all connected to this central point like spokes of a great wheel whose hub is this place of gathering and reflection. The sensation is one of being held gently at the heart of something larger and more enduring than any individual life, yet something that exists precisely to honor and sustain individual lives in all their quiet complexity and beauty. The night air moves differently in this open space, carrying with it scents and sounds from all parts of the settlement, a mixing of the various streams of life that flow together in this central place before dispersing again into the privacy and intimacy of individual dwellings and personal dreams. You breathe deeply of this communal air, feeling yourself connected through breath to every other living thing in this peaceful desert sanctuary, part of a single great organism that breathes collectively under the infinite expanse of stars. Chapter 4. gentle lights of the dwellings. From this central point of stillness, you begin to move again, drawn by some quiet intuition toward the narrow pathways that wind between the dwellings, leaving behind the open embrace of the square for the more intimate geography of homes and hearths. Your footsteps find their rhythm on the worn stone pathways, each step a soft percussion in the night's gentle symphony, and you move, as if pulled by invisible threads toward the warm glow that filters through windows and doorways, creating pools of amber light in the darkness. The pathways here are different from those that brought you to the square, narrower and more winding, following the natural contours of the land and the organic growth of a community that has evolved slowly over countless years. These are the arteries that carry the lifeblood of daily existence, connecting kitchen to workshop, garden to storehouse, neighbor to neighbor in an intricate web of relationship and mutual care. The stones beneath your feet have been smoothed by generations of such walking, worn into gentle curves that guide your steps naturally forward. You pass between walls of sun-dried brick and fitted stone, surfaces that have absorbed the heat of countless desert days and now release that warmth slowly into the cool night air. Your fingers brush against these walls as you walk, feeling the subtle textures left by hands that shaped them long ago, the slight imperfections that speak of human craft rather than mechanical precision. These are walls that have witnessed the full spectrum of human experience, the daily comings and goings, the celebrations and sorrows, the quiet moments of reflection that make up the substance of life in this peaceful place. The alleyways curve and branch in patterns that seem almost organic, like the channels carved by water flowing down a hillside, and you follow them with the easy trust of someone who knows that all paths in this settlement lead somewhere meaningful. There is no urgency in your movement, no destination that calls more strongly than the simple pleasure of walking through this maze of gentle domesticity. Each turn reveals new vistas of shadow and light, new arrangements of doorway and window, wall and garden that speak of lives lived thoughtfully and well. Here a low archway frames a glimpse of a tiny courtyard where herbs grow in earthenware pots, their leaves silver in the starlight and their fragrances mixing with the night air to create an invisible garden of scent that follows you as you pass. There a wooden gate stands slightly ajar, offering a momentary view of a pathway that winds deeper into the settlement's heart, toward dwellings and workshops whose purposes you can only imagine. The sense of mystery is gentle rather than forbidding, an invitation to wonder rather than worry about what lies beyond each threshold. The windows you pass glow with the warm light of oil lamps and candles, creating rectangular pools of golden illumination that spill out onto the pathway and guide your steps. These are not the harsh bright lights of another age, but the soft flickering radiance of flame that has lit human dwellings since the first fire was kindled in the first cave. The light seems to breathe with its own rhythm, expanding and contracting slightly as wicks burn and air moves through rooms, as if the very walls were slowly breathing in sleep. Through these windows you catch glimpses of rooms where the day's activities are winding toward their close, where the implements of daily life rest in their appointed places, and the furniture holds the invisible imprint of human presence. A loom stands empty near one window, its threads catching the lamplight like a spider's web touched with dew. At another window, shelves lined with ceramic vessels cast intricate shadows on the walls, each pot and jar a testament to the marriage of utility and beauty that characterizes everything in this place. The air in these narrow spaces between dwellings carries the mingled sense of many different lives, lived in close proximity yet with perfect respect for privacy and solitude. You breathe in the aroma of bread that was baked this morning and still lingers in the stones, the green smell of water on growing plants, the warm scent of wood that has been shaped by patient hands, the faint sweetness of incense that was burned in evening prayers. These fragrances weave together into a complex tapestry that speaks of community without crowding, of shared existence that honors individual choice. Sometimes you hear the soft sound of voices from within the dwellings, not the words themselves, but the gentle murmur of human conversation winding towards sleep, the tone that speaks of contentment and peace at the day's end. A laugh rises briefly and fades, warm and easy. Somewhere, a door closes with the soft thud of wood against wood. These sounds do not intrude upon the night's quietude, but become part of it, like the whisper of wind through date palms or the distant call of night birds in the desert beyond the settlement walls. Your path winds past doorways where light spills out in long rectangles across the stone pavement, and you can see that these thresholds are worn smooth by countless crossings, polished to a gentle gleam by the passage of feet both bare and sandaled over years beyond counting. Some doors stand open to the night air, allowing the gentle breeze to flow through homes and carry the day's accumulated warmth back out into the cooling darkness. Others are closed but not locked, secured only by the trust that characterizes all relationships in this peaceful community. The walls themselves seem to lean inward slightly as the pathways narrow, creating an embrace that feels protective rather than confining. You move through these gentle canyons of domestic architecture, like a stream flowing between carefully tended banks, your presence neither disturbing nor disturbed by the quiet life that unfolds behind each threshold. There is something deeply satisfying about this movement through spaces designed for human comfort and connection, spaces that speak of countless ordinary moments transformed by attention and care into something approaching the sacred. As you walk, your shadow moves ahead of you and behind you alternately as you pass between the pools of light that spill from windows and doorways, creating a constantly changing play of illumination and darkness that turns your simple passage into a kind of slow dance with light itself. The rhythm of this alternation becomes almost hypnotic, a visual breathing that mirrors the settling of your own pulse as you move deeper into the night's embrace and the settlement's heart. Chapter 5. The Sleeping Tools of Night Workshops. The steady rhythm of your footsteps carries you past doorways that exhale the lingering sense of daily craftsmanship, where workshops stand in patient stillness beneath the star-scattered dome of night. These are the places where hands shape clay and thread, where fire transforms earth into vessels, and looms transform fibers into cloth, all now resting in the profound quiet that settles over creative spaces when the day's work is complete and the tools lie waiting for tomorrow's touch. You pause before a pottery workshop where the great wheel sits motionless, its wooden surface worn smooth by countless hours of spinning clay beneath skilled palms. The wheel's stillness holds within it the memory of all the vessels that have been born from its turning, bowls and jars and cups that now grace tables throughout the settlement, each one carrying the invisible signature of the potter's hands and the wheel's patient revolution. In the dim light that filters through the workshop's open door, you can see rows of unfired pottery arranged on shelves, like sleeping thoughts waiting to be awakened by the kiln's transforming heat. The air here carries the earthy richness of clay mixed with water, that primordial scent of creation that speaks to something deep within human memory. Some ancient knowledge of shaping and making that connects these peaceful artisans to countless generations of makers who have worked with their hands to transform the raw materials of earth into objects of beauty and utility. There is dust on the wooden surfaces, clay dust that settles like fine snow over everything in the workshop, marking this as a place where the boundary between maker and material dissolves in the intimate act of creation. Your path leads you past the kiln that stands like a small mountain in the workshop's corner, its brick dome radiating the faintest warmth from yesterday's firing, a gentle heat that will fade completely by dawn, but now adds a subtle comfort to the night air. The opening of the kiln is sealed with clay and straw, protecting the pottery inside as it slowly cools in the darkness, each piece settling into its final form with tiny clicks and whispers that speak of clay remembering its journey from earth to art. Moving deeper into the quarter of workshops, you discover a weaving studio where great looms stand like wooden harps, waiting for invisible musicians to draw melodies from their strings. The vertical threads hang in perfect parallel lines, catching what little light enters through the windows and transforming it into a shimmer that seems to pulse gently with the night breeze. These warp threads have been measured and stretched with infinite care, each one positioned to work in harmony with its neighbors, creating the foundation upon which tomorrow's cloth will grow thread by thread, pass by pass, in the ancient rhythm of weft moving over and under, like breathing made visible. The shuttle rests in its place beside the loom, carved from hardwood and polished by years of passing through eager hands, its surface smooth as stone worn by water. In the morning it will dance again through the warp, carrying colored threads that will bloom into patterns of remarkable complexity and beauty. But now it sleeps in patient readiness, embodying the pause that exists between one breath and the next, between intention and action, between the thread that has been woven and the thread that waits to be woven. Baskets filled with spun thread sit beside the looms, each basket containing colors that were drawn from the desert's own palette: the deep browns of bark and root, the golden yellows of certain flowers that bloom only after rare rains, the subtle greens extracted from hardy grasses that survive in this arid place through techniques of adaptation that mirror the settlement's own relationship with its challenging environment. These colors speak of patience and observation, of weavers who have learned to see the hidden rainbows that exist within the apparently monochrome landscape of sand and stone. The wooden floor of the weaving studio is scattered with short lengths of thread, the inevitable remnants of work that accumulate like a soft carpet beneath the looms. These fragments catch your eye as you move slowly through the space, each piece a small record of choices made and patterns followed, collectively creating an abstract tapestry on the floor that mirrors in miniature the larger textiles taking shape on the looms above. There is something deeply satisfying about this accumulation of creative debris, these physical traces of the making process that speak of human hands at work in service of beauty and function. You continue through workshops where leather workers have left their tools arranged with ceremonial precision, where the cutting blades and stitching awls rest in careful rows like surgical instruments waiting for skilled hands to bring them back to life. The leather itself hangs from pegs along the walls, pieces in various stages of preparation, from raw hides scraped clean and stretched tight to finished goods ready for use. Each piece marked by the particular attention that transforms mere utility into something approaching art through the accumulation of countless careful decisions. The scent in the leather workshop is rich and complex, speaking of animal life transformed through human skill into objects of lasting value. There is the smell of tanning agents derived from desert plants, of oils worked deep into the hide to keep it supple through seasons of use, of smoke from fires that have cured and colored the leather until it achieves that perfect balance between strength and flexibility that marks the work of true craftspeople. In another workshop, you discover the domain of metalworkers, where small forges stand cold and quiet, their fires banked until morning brings the need for heat and hammering once again. The anvil sits like an altar in the center of the space, its surface polished mirror bright by countless blows from hammers that now rest in careful arrangements around the forge. The metal of the anvil seems to glow with its own inner light in the starlight that filters through the workshop's windows, as if it remembers all the sparks that have flown from its surface, all the red-hot iron that has been shaped upon its patient face. Tools hang from pegs driven into the workshop's walls, each implement crafted for a specific purpose in the transformation of raw metal into objects of daily use and occasional beauty. Tongs and hammers, files and chisels, all waiting in disciplined readiness for hands that know their capabilities and limitations, hands that have learned through years of practice to work with fire and iron in the ancient collaboration that turns ore into ornament, metal into meaning. The floor around the forge is scattered with scales of iron, tiny flakes that have been hammered away from larger pieces in the process of shaping, creating a dark carpet that crunches softly underfoot and speaks of the patient violence required to bend metal to human will. Yet there is nothing harsh about this space in its nighttime stillness, nothing that speaks of struggle or resistance, only the profound peace that settles over places where meaningful work is accomplished through skill developed over lifetimes of dedicated practice. As you move through these workshops, you begin to sense the invisible connections that link them all together. The way the potter's vessels will hold the weaver's dyes, the way the metalworker's needles will guide the leatherworker's thread, the way all of these separate crafts contribute to a larger pattern of interdependence that makes the settlement not just a collection of individual dwellings, but a living organism sustained by the circulation of skills and materials between workshops where human creativity takes countless different forms. Chapter 6: Gardens and Waterways, Songs of the Night. Beyond these workshops where creation takes form through patient hands, the settlement opens into terraced gardens that step down toward the source of all life in this desert place. Here, the careful cultivation of the earth reveals itself in neat rows of crops that drink deeply from channels carved with the same attention to detail that marks every aspect of this ancient community. The transition from stone and metal to soil and growing things happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, as if the boundary between human craft and natural abundance were merely a suggestion rather than a firm division. You find yourself walking along pathways that wind between these cultivated plots, your feet finding purchase on packed earth that has been smoothed by countless previous journeys along these same routes. The air here carries different fragrances than those that filled the workshops behind you, scents of growing things and moisture that speak of life sustained through deliberate care rather than left to the mercy of an unforgiving climate. These are not the wild perfumes of untamed nature, but the gentle aromas of plants that have learned to thrive under human guidance, vegetables and herbs that have found their place in the careful balance between wilderness and cultivation. The irrigation channels that feed these gardens flow with water that catches occasional starlight on its surface, creating tiny mirrors that reflect the vast sky above in fragmented glimpses of infinity. The sound of this flowing water provides a constant murmur that underlies all other sounds in this part of the settlement, a liquid melody that never quite resolves into silence but continues its patient song throughout the hours of darkness. It is the sound of abundance made audible, of resources carefully managed and distributed according to need rather than desire, of a community that has learned to live within the boundaries imposed by scarcity without allowing those boundaries to define the limits of human flourishing. As you move deeper into these agricultural spaces, you begin to notice the subtle variations in the crops that grow here, the way different plants have been grouped according to their needs and their contributions to the larger system of sustenance that supports the settlement. Root vegetables push deep into soil that has been enriched through generations of careful composting, their leaves forming low canopies that conserve moisture and provide shelter for smaller plants that prefer indirect light. Climbing vines wrap around carefully constructed trellises, reaching toward the stars with the same patient determination that marks all growth in this carefully tended environment. The channels that carry water to these plants follow contours that speak of profound understanding of how water moves across landscape, how it can be guided without being forced, how it can be shared without being wasted. These waterways branch and converge according to principles that seem both practical and almost ceremonial, as if the distribution of water were not merely a matter of irrigation, but a ritual expression of the community's relationship with the source of life itself. Stone-lined channels give way to earthen furrows, and earthen furrows open into small reservoirs where water can rest before continuing its journey through the network of cultivation that transforms desert into garden. The plants themselves seem to lean into the night air with a kind of grateful relaxation, their leaves rustling softly in breezes that carry the accumulated warmth of the day into the cooler darkness. Some release fragrances that become more pronounced as temperatures drop, night-blooming flowers opening to receive whatever nocturnal visitors might assist in the ancient dance of pollination and renewal. Others simply stand in quiet dignity, their presence a testament to the possibility of abundance, even in places where water must be measured and soil must be built grain by grain through patient accumulation of organic matter. Walking among these growing things, you begin to sense the deep rhythms that govern life in this place, cycles that extend far beyond the daily alternation of light and darkness into seasonal patterns and longer progressions that connect individual harvests to the continuing story of human habitation in a challenging environment. There is something profoundly peaceful about being surrounded by plants that exist not for display or ornament, but for the essential purpose of sustaining life, crops that will eventually become meals shared in the common spaces of the settlement, ingredients that will transform into nourishment for bodies that must continue the work of maintaining this careful balance between human need and environmental possibility. The sound of water continues its quiet conversation with the night, sometimes louder where channels narrow and flow increases in speed, sometimes softer where streams spread into broader channels that allow for slower, more thorough absorption by roots that have learned to make the most of every drop. This liquid music provides a soundtrack for contemplation, a gentle accompaniment to thoughts that arise naturally in spaces where growth and patience intersect, invisible demonstrations of what becomes possible when human intention aligns with natural processes rather than opposing them. You find yourself pausing beside a small reservoir where water gathers before branching into multiple channels, each leading toward different sections of the gardens. The surface of this collected water reflects the star-filled sky with perfect clarity, creating a mirror that seems to contain the entire cosmos within its still boundaries. In this reflection, the vast emptiness of the desert night sky finds expression in miniature, reminding you that abundance and scarcity, fullness and emptiness, are perhaps not opposites, but different aspects of the same fundamental reality that governs all existence in this place, where survival depends on understanding rather than conquest. Chapter 7. Sacred Silence, Ancient Whispers. From the quiet gardens where water speaks its gentle truths to patient earth, your footsteps carry you along stone pathways that curve toward the heart of the settlement, where older purposes find their expression in spaces dedicated to contemplation and the cultivation of inner stillness. The transition from gardens to sacred ground occurs so gradually that you become aware of it only through subtle changes in the quality of silence, a deepening that suggests proximity to places where generations have come to seek answers to questions that arise naturally from the experience of living in a landscape that demands both humility and profound attention to the movements of forces larger than individual will or desire. The stone beneath your feet changes in texture and color, becoming smoother and darker as you approach structures that were among the first to be built when this community established itself in the protective embrace of the desert's quiet spaces. These stones have been worn by countless footsteps, polished by the passage of hands that have reached out for guidance along walls that have supported seekers through decades of searching and finding, losing and discovering again the threads of meaning that connect individual experience to the larger patterns that govern existence in this place, where survival depends as much on spiritual resilience as on practical knowledge of how to coax life from seemingly barren ground. Before you rises a small temple, its entrance marked not by grand doorways or imposing architecture, but by a simple opening that invites rather than intimidates, designed to welcome those who come seeking not dramatic revelations, but the quiet discoveries that emerge from patient waiting in spaces deliberately created for listening to the subtle voices that speak only to those who have learned the discipline of genuine stillness. The building itself seems to emerge from the desert floor rather than imposing itself upon the landscape, its walls following natural contours and its height remaining modest, as if its builders understood that true sacred space derives its power not from size or grandeur, but from the quality of attention it fosters and the depth of peace it makes possible for those who enter with sincere intention. The entrance draws you forward with the magnetism of spaces that have absorbed years of prayer and meditation, places where the accumulated quietude of countless individual moments of seeking has created an atmosphere that seems to embrace visitors before they have even crossed the threshold. As you approach, you notice small details that speak to the care with which this space has been maintained. stones that have been carefully fitted together without mortar, relying instead on the precision of their cutting and the patient skill of builders who understood that structures intended to endure must work with natural forces rather than against them. Joints that allow for the expansion and contraction that comes with temperature changes, while maintaining the integrity necessary for supporting walls and roof through seasons and years. Stepping inside, you enter a space that seems larger than its external dimensions would suggest, an effect created not through architectural tricks, but through the careful proportions that draw the eye upward toward a ceiling that allows natural light to enter through cleverly placed openings that track the sun's daily journey across the sky, providing illumination that changes subtly throughout the day and creates patterns of light and shadow that serve as a natural timepiece for those who have learned to read the language of moving brightness on stone surfaces that respond to celestial rhythms with quiet predictability. The floor beneath your feet consists of large, flat stones arranged in patterns that guide movement toward the center of the space, where a shallow depression holds water that enters through underground channels connected to the same system that serves the gardens and living spaces of the settlement. This central pool reflects whatever light enters from above, creating a focal point that draws attention without demanding it. A quiet presence that invites contemplation without insisting upon any particular form of worship or practice, leaving individuals free to discover their own methods of connecting with whatever truths this space helps to reveal. Around the edges of the central area, shallow alcoves have been carved into the walls, each containing a simple stone bench worn smooth by use and positioned to face either the center of the room or the openings that provide views of the star-filled sky visible beyond the temple's boundaries. These seating areas offer solitude within community, places where individuals can pursue their own forms of meditation or prayer while remaining connected to others who share their seeking, part of a larger congregation of quiet searchers whose presence supports rather than intrudes upon individual spiritual practice. The walls themselves bear no decorative elements beyond the natural beauty of the stone from which they are constructed, surfaces that show the marks of the tools used in their shaping and the subtle variations in color and texture that speak to the geological history embedded in the materials from which this space has been created. In the absence of ornate decoration, attention naturally turns inward toward the movements of breath and heartbeat, the subtle sensations of being alive and present in a space dedicated to the exploration of what lies beneath the surface of daily concerns and immediate needs. Settling onto one of the worn stone benches, you find yourself surrounded by a silence that seems to have depth and texture, a quiet that contains within itself the accumulated stillness of all those who have sat in similar positions, seeking similar peace, discovering similar truths about the nature of existence in a place where human life depends on maintaining harmonious relationships with forces that remain largely invisible but whose influence shapes every aspect of experience in this settlement that has learned to thrive through cooperation rather than domination. The air inside this sacred space carries traces of incense burned during ceremonies, whose specific rituals have been adapted to the resources available in this desert environment. Fragrances derived from plants that grow in the surrounding landscape, and resins that can be obtained through trade with distant communities. Scents that connect the immediate experience of this place to the broader network of human culture and commerce that makes possible the exchange of materials and ideas necessary for maintaining the rich inner life that sustains people through the challenges of existence in an environment that demands constant attention to practical necessities. In the growing quietude that fills your awareness as you sit in the space designed for contemplation, you begin to sense the presence of questions that arise naturally from the experience of living in a place where every day requires decisions about how to balance individual needs with community welfare, personal desires with environmental limitations, immediate concerns with long-term sustainability. These questions present themselves not as problems requiring immediate solutions, but as ongoing companions in the journey of conscious existence, mysteries that deepen rather than resolve through investigation, sources of wonder rather than anxiety. The water in the central pool occasionally produces small sounds as air bubbles rise to the surface, or as gentle currents create tiny movements that catch and scatter reflected light, creating patterns that shift and change with hypnotic regularity. These subtle movements serve as focal points for meditation, natural mandalas that appear and dissolve according to their own rhythms, teaching through example the lessons about impermanence and constant change that govern all aspects of life in this place where adaptation and flexibility determine survival more surely than rigid adherence to unchanging plans or expectations. Breathing deeply in this atmosphere of accumulated peace, you find your own inner rhythms beginning to slow and deepen, matching the pace of a space that exists primarily to support the cultivation of states of consciousness that remain largely inaccessible amid the normal concerns of daily life in even the most peaceful of communities. Here, surrounded by walls that hold and amplify the quality of attention brought by generations of seekers, you discover the possibility of touching, however briefly, the profound stillness that underlies all activity, the fundamental peace that serves as the source from which both action and rest emerge in their proper seasons and proportions. Chapter 8. Watchtower beyond the horizon, boundary between desert and stars. From this place of gathered stillness, you feel yourself drawn toward movement again, pulled by an invisible thread toward the edges of the settlement, where the constructed world meets the infinite expanse that surrounds and defines all boundaries in this place, where human presence maintains itself through constant negotiation with forces larger than individual will or community. Attention! Your feet carry you through passages that lead away from the central areas of concentrated activity, moving along pathways that become gradually more sparse in their decoration, more functional in their design, as they approach the perimeter where the practical necessity of watching and waiting takes precedence over the aesthetic considerations that flourish in spaces dedicated to rest and contemplation. The air grows cooler as you walk, carrying on its currents the sense of the open desert that lies beyond the protective walls, mixing the familiar aromas of cultivated herbs and cooking fires with the wilder fragrances of plants that grow without human guidance, thriving in conditions that would challenge even the most adapted of the settlement's residents. This blending of domestic and untamed essences creates an olfactory boundary as distinct as any physical wall, marking the transition between spaces shaped by human intention and territories that remain subject only to the ancient laws that govern wind and sand, heat and cold, the patient persistence of life forms that have learned to extract sustenance from seemingly barren ground. Your path leads upward now, along stone steps worn smooth by generations of feet that have climbed toward the watching post that stands sentinel over this particular section of the settlement's edge. A modest tower that rises just high enough above the surrounding structures to provide clear sight lines across the terrain that stretches away in all directions toward horizons that blur the distinction between earth and sky in the soft darkness that precedes the deepest hours of night. The steps themselves seem to encourage a particular rhythm of ascent, their spacing and height creating a natural cadence that slows the heartbeat and deepens the breath, preparing the body for the expanded perspective that awaits at the tower's modest summit. As you climb, the sounds of the settlement below become gradually more distant, fading into a gentle murmur that blends with the whisper of wind moving around and through the stone structure that will soon embrace and shelter your presence while offering views that extend far beyond the comfortable boundaries of home and hearth. The tower itself appears to have grown from the earth rather than been built upon it, its walls following the natural contours of the slight rise on which it stands, its openings positioned to frame particular views while providing protection from the winds that can sweep across the open desert with surprising force and persistence. The final steps bring you to a circular chamber open to the sky on all sides, its waist-high walls creating a sense of security while never obscuring the vast panorama that surrounds the settlement, like an ocean of possibility and mystery. Here, in this space designed for the patient observation of distant movements and changes in weather patterns, you discover that the primary purpose of watching extends far beyond the practical necessity of early warning, encompassing instead a form of meditation that arises naturally from sustained attention to the subtle shifts and changes that mark the passage of time across landscapes that appear unchanging to casual observation but reveal constant transformation to eyes willing to wait and see. The desert spreads before you in all directions, its surface painted in shades of silver and deep blue by starlight that transforms familiar daytime colors into something altogether more mysterious and enchanting. What appeared harsh and forbidding under the intense scrutiny of the sun now reveals itself as a landscape of infinite gentleness, its rolling contours softened by darkness into forms that suggest the presence of vast sleeping creatures, ancient beings that breathe so slowly that their movements become visible only to those willing to watch through entire seasons and years. Chapter 9. The Warmth of Community. From your vantage point in the tower, you can see the gentle glow that emanates from the communal ovens at the heart of the settlement, their warmth creating small pools of amber light that spill out through doorways and windows into the cool night air. The bakers have been working through the quiet hours, their movements slow and deliberate as they tend to the ancient rhythms of bread making, their hands shaping dough that will become sustenance for the community when morning arrives with its promise of shared meals and quiet conversation. The scent of baking bread drifts upward on currents of warm air, carrying with it the essence of grain that grew under distant suns, now transformed through fire and patience into something that will nourish both body and spirit. This fragrance mingles with the cooler air of the desert night, creating layers of sensation that speak to the fundamental human need for comfort and security, for the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, others are working to ensure that basic needs will be met when the new day begins. Below, in the small dwellings that cluster around the communal spaces, you can sense the peaceful breathing of those who have already surrendered to sleep, their dreams perhaps touched by the warm scents that drift through their windows. Children sleep deeply beside their parents, their breath coming in the steady rhythms of complete trust, while elders rest with the satisfaction of those who have seen many such nights pass and know that morning will bring its own gentle pleasures and quiet tasks. The settlement breathes as a single entity, its various elements connected by invisible threads of mutual dependence and care, each person contributing to the whole through their presence, their work, their willingness to be part of something larger than themselves. This connection extends beyond the visible boundaries of the community, reaching out into the desert that surrounds and sustains them, acknowledging their place within the larger patterns of existence that govern all living things. Chapter 10. Fading into Desert Dreams. You move slowly toward the settlement's gentle edge, where the last earthen walls give way to the infinite embrace of the desert night. The transition happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, as cultivated spaces blend seamlessly with wild sand that stretches away under countless stars. Here, at this threshold between human shelter and endless wilderness, the night feels particularly profound, holding within it both the warmth of community behind you and the vast mystery that extends beyond the horizon. The final structures cast long, soft shadows that merge with the natural contours of the land, their surfaces still holding traces of the day's heat while slowly releasing it into the cooling air. These outer buildings seem to breathe with the rhythm of the desert itself, their adobe walls expanding and contracting in barely perceptible movements that speak to their deep connection with the earth from which they emerged. Your footsteps become even softer here, each placement of foot upon sand creating whisper-quiet sounds that seem to dissolve immediately into the greater silence. The path beneath you is less defined now, more suggestion than certainty, marked by the gentle passage of others who have walked this way before, seeking perhaps the same sense of completion that draws you forward into the peaceful darkness. The air carries different scents at this boundary place, where the familiar fragrances of the settlement mingle with the clean, mineral essence of untouched sand and stone. Night-blooming flowers release their subtle perfumes into the darkness, their presence felt more than seen, while somewhere in the distance, the barely audible sound of wind moving across dunes creates a rhythm that seems designed to lull the restless mind into quietude. Above, the stars appear even more brilliant here at the settlement's edge, unobstructed by walls or roof lines, spreading across the sky in patterns that have guided travelers and dreamers since time beyond memory. Their light falls gently upon your face and hands, cool and ancient, connecting this moment to countless other nights when others stood in similar places, feeling the same sense of wonder at the vast beauty that surrounds all human endeavor. The settlement behind you continues its quiet evening activities, the sounds, now distant and dreamlike, blending into the natural symphony of night that includes the soft rustle of small creatures moving through sparse vegetation and the almost inaudible whisper of cooling stone. These sounds do not disturb the peace, but rather deepen it, creating layers of gentle sensation that encourage the mind to release its hold on conscious thought. You find yourself moving even more slowly now, each step a meditation on the simple act of being present in this moment, in this place where the works of human hands meet the eternal patterns of the natural world. The boundary between walking and stillness begins to blur, as does the distinction between the observer and the observed, between the seeker and that which is sought. The night air embraces you completely now. Its coolness a gentle reminder of the desert's vast presence, while the warmth still radiating from the settlement speaks of human comfort and security. In this perfect balance between elements, between civilization and wilderness, between waking and sleeping, you feel yourself beginning to merge with the deeper rhythms that govern all existence. Your breathing becomes synchronized with the subtle movements of the air around you, each inhalation bringing the essence of this peaceful place deeper into your being, while each exhalation releases the tensions and concerns that belong to daylight hours. The process happens naturally, without effort or intention, as though the night itself is teaching your body the art of perfect relaxation. The sounds of the settlement grow ever fainter, becoming part of the dream landscape that surrounds you, while the vast silence of the desert opens like a gentle embrace, inviting you to release your hold on conscious awareness and allow yourself to drift into the profound peace that waits at the edge of sleep, where all boundaries dissolve and only the eternal rhythm of breath and heartbeat remains to guide you into the deepest rest.